everyone. Welcome to Antidotes, Stories in Medicine. This is Christine. We are back. I am so happy to be talking to you guys again. I took a little bit of time off just for some self-care and mental health and just figuring things out. The podcast release schedule may be a little bit wacky, so just bear with me because life gets a little bit out of control sometimes. So I decided instead of doing something like seasons for the time being, I'm just going to keep releasing episodes as I get them and keep it going. If it changes, I will let you know, but I'm very happy to be releasing another episode. Just so you know, in the true fashion of my life, the first couple of minutes of this episode got completely deleted, and thankfully I had a backup recording that was not nearly as good, but it was okay. So the audio for like 5 minutes sounds kind of crummy. Either skip through it or just bear with it because it gets a lot better. Just so you know, just be warned. But this week's episode is with another podcaster, and I'm so happy to introduce Kim. Hi, Kim. How you doing?
Heyo. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to have you. We actually connected on Twitter.
The magical world of Twitter.
The magical world of Twitter, which I was not familiar with Twitter, like, until the podcast started.
It's seriously a magical land. I don't even know what I'm doing on there half the time.
I think you tweeted something, and I made, like, some really sarcastic, snarky comment, and that's how it...
Oh, I was like, this is my people right here.
Yeah, I think I made like a pole dancing joke about IV poles.
Oh, and, yeah, like, that's right.
And then this back and forth, and I was like, oh, someone with a sick and twisted sense of humor. I like this random podcast that's tweeting. And it's so funny because my sister is a non-medical person. She's a very like project management, political kind of person, and she's like been on Twitter since it, started to exist. And she's telling me how you should engage on Twitter, and it's different for the medical world. It's not really the same. And so she's like, you should follow these people and you should tweet these things. And I was like, no. Stripper and drug jokes. That's really how you should be doing it.
I think that my thing on Twitter, because I know that, there's literally like the hashtag of med Twitter and like nurse Twitter to connect to more healthcare related ones, is that it's half like articles that are actually really relevant to your practice, and then half like horrible memes and awful jokes that you can really only tell within the company of other healthcare people, or else everyone's going to think you're disgusting and a horrible person.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is on Twitter, I think, for healthcare. It's like, that and making sure you don't violate HIPAA when you share a story or like a patient talking to you and what patients say. There's literally a Twitter out there, like an account called like shit patients say.
I feel like that's a big no-no.
Yeah, that's risky. That's risky. I just like to share sometimes, some of the crazier things in the ER, both on Twitter and on my podcast.
So about what you do, you are an ER nurse.
Yeah, so I'm an ER nurse. Right now, I actually do travel nursing, so I feel like that's given me a little bit more, I guess you can say, fuel for some more interesting stories, but also just seeing a lot of the country and being able to interact with a lot of various different communities, which in turn means seeing a lot of different medical emergencies. And the whole entire reason I think I started my podcast was I had been doing travel nursing for about 1.5 years, and I had met some really cool people from it. And when you travel nurse, you're driving from your next assignments, and it's like, you have these 17, 20-hour drives that you either break up, or sometimes, depending on when your assignment starts, you have to go all the way through. And so podcasts and audiobooks and music kind of keep you awake. So a lot of my friends, we kept going back and forth. We're all travel nurses. We were trying to share with each other like podcasts, and we were just talking, shooting the breeze like you do. And we were just like, man, we should make a podcast. And we actually thought about a few of us doing it, but nobody really actually pulled the trigger on it until I did. So now they're all just like, oh, well, you did it. It's fine. Maybe one day they'll be on there. I don't know. It's a call out to my friends out there who need to get on the show. But there is, there's so much that, you see going coast to coast. And even if, you stay at an ER for a while, you see a lot. But I could say that I've amassed a lot of stories in the past 3 years I've done travel nursing at this point. And I've been an ER nurse for like 7 years now. So I mean, I always say like I'm pretty much like a baby, but then I work night shift and I realize like I'm actually an elder on night shift. That whole culture of night shift, especially in the ER, is that's where a lot of the new nurses end up. So me being like, oh my gosh, I'm so new, turns into me being the only one who knows how to do something, and I'm the traveler. So it's like, I don't even know where your equipment is, but I know how to do what you need to do.
Get me the stuff and I'll show you how to do it.
Exactly. It's a lot of me going, where's this at? Okay. Can you bring that to me real quick and then like show me where it is afterwards? Thank you.
So you've been travel nursing for 3 years.
Yeah. It's been literally a journey. I've been through 2 minivans.
What's been the most interesting ER placement that you've had?
I don't know if it's necessarily the most interesting, but I would say the one that was like the one that I saw a lot, or I should say where I branched a lot of my stories off of, or maybe I'll backtrack. The one that I was like, because I had been thinking for a while, maybe I should do a podcast. I listened to enough of them. I could probably do that, like every other person that podcasts, right?
Right. I can talk a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, it can't be that hard. Lo and behold, it is. It probably was right around, well, I would say it's actually when I was back in Arizona. Arizona is my home state, and I took a contract out there that was actually really challenging, not because of the patient load, but because of the dynamics of the ER. So that's when I started noticing a little bit more about why I like travel nursing versus staying actually full-time as staff anymore. But if we're talking more about patient stories, that would be a little while later when I was at one of my assignments in Texas, where I saw a lot of people who got bit by snakes.
Oh, God.
So I was like, oh, okay, that's a whole different ballgame. Even though I'm from Arizona, a lot of us know not to mess with snakes. I guess in Texas, they don't care. So, so that was the first time in a long time I had to go back into the vaults of my mind, aka Google in my pocket, and figure out about anti-venom and things to look out for. So that was actually a nice refresher in terms of seeing that. I haven't really encountered that too much. But, you go from different region to region. I've been East Coast to West Coast to East Coast to West Coast. I'm still on the West Coast as of right now. So I've been back and forth. I've been to the South. I've not been too much in the North, but I have definitely done a few assignments in the South. I've done a few on the coast, the East Coast, and I've been in the Pacific Northwest a couple times. And I will say, like in every ER, there are certain things that are familiar, that trend, and you're just like, okay, this is everywhere. And then you talk to the newer nurses, because we were talking about how being a night shift, that's usually the shift I am. That's where you have more newer nurses. And, I talk to them, and it's kind of just like, I could tell that they're frustrated already, which to me concerns me greatly.
Yeah.
That they're so frustrated and they feel, I suppose, I don't want to say burnout, because I mean, when you're just starting out, it's hard to say that you have burnout, but I could tell that they are slowly trending that way if there isn't somebody there to be like, you need to take time for you. This is not your life.
Yeah.
Somebody put it great the other day, actually, where they said, I love my profession, but I hate my job. And I think that's so important to have that distinction, especially because I work in the ER, but throughout all of healthcare, it's like, yeah, I love being a nurse, but some days I hate my job as much as the next person does.
Yeah, and I think that is so true about EMS too, is you see people that have only been in the profession for like 6 months or a year, and they get so jaded so fast, and a lot of it comes from like a really toxic culture. They're like so excited and they're so happy to like save lives and do all this shit, and that's fantastic. But then you have some shitty cigarette smoking beer bellied asshole with a firefighter mustache that's like, no kid, you need to hate everybody. And that's a big part of my podcast too, is like, no, it's okay to really like what you do, and it's okay to find joy in certain moments, and then it's okay to be upset about things and then back away from it. Like, we can enjoy this having been experienced and still be tough as nails, but not jaded as fuck all the time. Like, that's okay.
I always say, and I always say that, I had my own bout of burnout
Oh, yeah, me too.
Within like 3 years of my profession, to the point where I stepped back for 5 to 6 months, and I went and I hightailed it to Australia, and I was not a nurse at all. Like, I had my dad calls it my gap year that I condensed into 5 to 6 months, because I was still licensed and stuff, but I had had enough. I was like, there's got to be more to nursing. I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. I got a degree. I work so hard. I get people who literally yell at me every day, and I don't want to be in that if that's not what I'm supposed to do. So I went and I hightailed it over there, and I had fun not being a nurse, but like, it was within, I would say, 3 weeks that I was like, I really, really like what I do. And like, taking that step back from it was exactly what I needed, and like, hit that reset button. And when I came back, I was like, I'm going to do travel nursing, because then I can merge together two of the things that I like, which is not having to commit to a place. I am a person that does not like commitment. I have a lot of exes who say the same thing. But I also like the fact that, you know, I can go from ER to ER and be a really good support person and actually bring other stuff to different ERs. That's the cool thing about travel nursing, is that I see how something's done in one system and I go, that is a better way of doing something that I didn't think of. And then I could go to a hospital in a different state and show somebody else how to do it. And then all of a sudden, you start to see more and more people doing that or adopting that system.
Yeah.
Or you see something that is maybe not as good in a system, and you can give them input, and you don't come across as being arrogant or snobby. You're just saying, hey, I saw how this worked in this other hospital. You might want to try it.
Yeah, it's good to have perspective. And I think people get so bogged down in just the everyday, or maybe that's the only job that they've ever had. And it's the way we've always done things. And, because we've always done it this way is the worst answer for why you're doing something. So that's an awesome point about travel nursing that I didn't think of, because I've never travel nursed. I've never traveled like that.
Oh, people always go like, what does it mean to be a travel nurse? And I mean, the condensed version is just like, well, you know, you move from state to state every 3 months, and you move from different hospital to a different hospital. But, I mean, I can make lasting friendships with the staff there. You know, I'm living there, so it's not like I'm flying in, working my shifts, and flying out. Although some people do that because they have their own family situations or whatever. But for the most part, people live in the place that they work, and they're in the community, and they're there to explore it. So it's like, I gain an appreciation for where I am, even though I'm only there for 3 months at a time.
Yeah.
And it's like, that community becomes my community. And I mean, to this day, I'm still in touch with people I've worked with years ago. You know, I have my Southern family from some of my assignments. They'll mail me stuff, just like cards or something, or you know, I've donated to a few things for their kiddos, whatever. But it's like, you know, you can create friendships and relationships with people going from place to place every 3 months. The terms of lasting, though, everybody always talks about what's it like to date in that, and I can tell you, it's just abysmal. So that's a whole other thing that I won't bring into, but for the most part, I mean, it's scratched the itch that I needed in order to reset and really remain happy within this profession, because this job drags you the hell down. Like, it kicks the shit out of you sometimes.
Yeah.
And I mean, working from emergency perspective like we have, it's like, you see shit that nobody else should see, but you see it numerous times in different forms. And it's just like, most people would be devastated by it, but you got 10 hours left of your shift.
Yeah.
So you gotta nut up and go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so hard to wrap my mind around that sometimes, about how, like, I can walk into a patient's room and know that somebody has passed away, like, 2 hours before you came in for whatever it is you came in for.
Right. You came in for toe pain. And
yeah, there you go.
There was a family just grieving over the loss of someone in here an hour beforehand. And you don't know that, but I know that. And that's still in my mind. You know, I mean, I never worked in the ER as a nurse, but it's that same thing of being in the ambulance too. It's, I would go pronounce someone dead or go bring a code to the hospital, and it was like the most physically exhausting thing, because you're dragging them out of their house and they're pretty heavy and like everything goes wrong.
And you're doing like full on CPR.
Right.
That is an exhausting process.
And then you go to a dialysis
how
hall.
exhausting it is.
And then you go bring someone to an appointment and you're like, and they're like, you're late. And you're like, you don't know what I just did. You have no idea. The like super, oh, my dog's upset. My dog agrees. He's very upset.
He's very fired up.
Yeah. So do you think you'll ever stop travel nursing? I'm sure everyone asks you that all the time.
I always do like this thing like, okay, I've reached another year. Have I been anywhere that I want to go back to, that I could see myself staying back to? And the answer for the past 3 years has been no. So, and that's not to say that I'm not open to it. I know people who've traveled for years and then they find that hospital that they really want to go back to. I have a friend who recently accepted a full-time job after traveling for 10 years.
Wow.
But then again, she also traveled for 10 years. So it's kind of like,
yeah, I'm
good with this life. My family, supports it a lot. And I've worked out some stuff where I'll take an assignment closer to home so that I can actually check in and be with my family for 3 months. So it is kind of nice in that respect, but then it's like I can leave for the rest of the year and then I could do stuff and then come back and take another assignment. So I don't see myself stopping anytime soon, but I'm sure there will be a point where I'm going to say like, oh, I want to maybe not so much stop because I want to go to a different hospital, but maybe I'll stop because I want to go into a different venture. And I always think that's the cool thing with nursing is that I'm working emergency now, but who's to say in the next 10 years I might not switch to a different specialty,
right.
And pick up like per diem in emergency. I always will have my heart in emergency, but other stuff interests me. It's kind of fun being in nursing because you're able to, as long as somebody's able to take a chance on you or you get into a program, you can do a lot within it and you can do just so much. I just feel like it's always expanding. I mean, I have friends who do, home health stuff, but then they also do telehealth. They're the on-call people that you call the nurse lines for. And they love it because, for their situation and their family, maybe they have to stay at home, but they still want to be a nurse. So it's great that there's so much that you can do within this profession. And I think that helps with, kind of going back to burnout and stuff. That kind of helps to keep things fresh for people, is that you can change gears and you don't always have to feel like, God, I'm stuck in this.
Right.
Like, no, you're not.
Yeah,
you're never. You really can branch out or even reduce that. Yeah. I think as nurses, we give so much for every single shift we're on that we don't realize we can reduce our load and take some of that pressure and some of those outside forces off of us if we switch gears or go down part-time because we're scared in a way maybe, or we don't like the idea of change like we were talking about before.
Yeah. I
mean, even within our profession, it's hard to accept change. So
I also think we're generally very intense people. I know myself, I was changing jobs and then I already have a per diem job and this opportunity came back up to do like 1 day a week going back into addiction medicine, which I'd really liked. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it because my new job only wants like 4 days a week. And then I was like, I don't need 3 jobs and a podcast. Like, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, I'm already, it's a very tenuous grasp on reality at the moment. So like, but I will work myself into the ground because that's just what Absolutely. I do because I love everything and I want to sample everything and why can't I? And there's like, no, because
YOLO.
I'll be, yeah, like, but it's like, no, you can't do that. You need to like chill the fuck out and just pick one thing and do it well, or just pick 3 out of 5 things and do them pretty well. and
right?
Yeah, and that's
you gotta pace yourself.
Yeah.
It's that whole marathon, not a sprint thing. I think that's especially true
especially
when
in clogs.
Yeah. Okay, can we just talk about that real quick? I cannot get on board the dance goes, what is it, Alegria. I can't get on board that. There's a tech I work with that wears Crocs and I just always want to like take them off their feet and throw them in the decon room because really, Crocs, really?
I have dance goes and I only wear them to walk my dog in them because I can just slip them on and they're really sturdy and they usually don't sink into mud. So
yeah, but they just feel like
they're great.
I don't know. I can't. I wear my sneakers. I have always worn sneakers. I tried somebody's on at their house one time. I was like over at somebody's house and we were hanging out and they're like, oh, do you want to try on my dance goes? And I was like, I can't commit to the height thing. It's again, that commitment issue. And I just was like, I just feel like I'm wearing wedges.
You're going to teeter over. I did wear them when I wore them as a visiting nurse. So for anyone who doesn't know, dance goes are these like super thick clogs that nurses wear, and they're really well made, and this is not an ad for dance goes, although if you want to sponsor me, that would be
not SpawnCon.
This would be fantastic if you want to sponsor my podcast. But I loved them when I wore them, but I was a visiting nurse like in the Boston area, and so I'm going out to people's houses in these very tall like platform shoes clogs.
They're like wedges.
They're not supportive footwear for like urban outdoorsy type stuff where like the sidewalks cracked trying to get into these like hoarder houses that people need home care in. And I was like, look, I can step through the rat feces with them nicely and they're not getting into my scrub bottoms, so that's nice. And I didn't want to like mess up my good running shoes. But
oh, that's true. You'd have to put like booties on over them.
Well, I could wipe the dance goes down.
Yeah.
With those like everything wipes.
The bleach ones. The nice.
Yeah, really.
We're not talking Sandy cloth. We're talking the dispatch wipes. That's the one that have like the bleach in them where they're like, please wear 2 pairs of gloves.
Right. There's a picture of a baby that's crossed out on them because like you'll lose all your reproductive value if you touch
or
them.
like, I always was like, did someone try to wipe a baby with them? Like, please don't use these as baby wipes.
I always call them the anti-baby wipes.
Because, like, if they get into your skin, then it's just like, well, you might end up with a problem.
Yeah, you lose all fertility.
It's fine.
Anyways, but now I have to wear, like, business casual, and I wear flats and stuff, and it's very much a different world.
The life of an NP.
Yeah, well, I used to wear EMT, like,
the boots.
Combat-style boots with, like, steel toes and everything, and I looked like a man.
With the zippers on the side?
Oh, yeah, and trauma shears in the pockets, and, like, these baggy pants.
I'm just saying.
They're comfortable.
Y'all just look badass. I mean, you just walk in, and you have, like, your pockets full of everything.
And, like, the little pen lights, because, of course, you know, you have to. Some flashlights. Nothing says official like a flashlight on your belt.
That's okay. I wear a fanny pack at work. So, I mean, I don't know how professional that is when the tourist comes into your room and it's like, hey, I'm your nurse. Also, I have snacks in here. But I don't have snacks in my fanny pack. I might have some snacks.
Well, anesthesiologists usually walk around with fanny packs, but they're fanny packs of drugs, which is pretty cool.
I mean, I wish I had that. Maybe I'll be a CRNA.
Yeah.
And I'll just be like, this is the whole reason I went to school is so that I can put drugs in my pockets.
I've got granola bars and propofol.
Oh my gosh. Don't mix up the two.
Yeah.
Or maybe do. I don't know.
Shoot, that was not a milk box.
Yeah, exactly. Milk of amnesia, as they say.
So, we have been talking about like what you've been doing, but in my podcast we tell a lot of stories.
Let's do it.
Do you have any good stories that you haven't told in your podcast yet?
I do. But I guess keeping in your theme with being a little bit dark.
Yeah, not a comic. Yours is pretty funny.
I mean, I try to make it funny and lighthearted because it's like, God, I see so much bad stuff. But there are a few stories that I'm like, well, I'll reserve it for somebody else because I'm not telling it on mine. So there you go. Just kidding. That's not why. But I just feel like it doesn't necessarily fit in sometimes with what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we could go there, I guess I could talk about like the first time I had a pediatric code and how horrible that was.
Sure, if you want to. I mean, don't feel obligated to tell something funny or tell something horribly tragic. But if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it.
We could go with I'm trying to think of like the patients that have had stuff stuck in them. We've had a few golf balls. I guess there's the one with the apple, but there was also a guy that got a branch stuck in his neck. I mean, why don't I go with the stuck ones? We'll go with the stuck ones. We'll make it a little bit more lighthearted.
I got a stuck one. I got a good stuck one.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah.
Let's go with stuck ones. Okay, so on my podcast, near the end, for
Which
the most
is what?
part, People Are Wild. That's the podcast that I host that I've remembered to plug. Ding. The more you know star flies around in the background. So, I do, on most of my episodes, a few of them I slack on. I do a game at the end, I don't know if it's really a game, called You Got What Stuck Where I like to give people 4 clues and describe a thing that actually happened to people that were reported in journals, the news, not anything that's like a HIPAA violation, because, you know, we are in the land of HIPAA. I make sure that things are signed off, and like I said, they were covered by the news, they're interviews with the actual person, or they're in journals. So I do this game, You Got What Stuck where it talks about what people have gotten stuck in them. And they're not people that I've seen. They're usually, you know, different accounts. But we can talk about some of the stuff that I have seen stuck in people.
Sure.
Because I feel like in the emergency room, when you tell somebody, oh yeah, I work in the emergency room, they ask you a few different questions right off the bat if they're non-medical.
Yep.
Some of it being, what's the grossest thing you've seen?
Yep.
What's the strangest thing you've seen? What's the worst thing you've seen?
Yep.
It's usually those variations of those 3 questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually, in order to not scar people with some of the worst stuff I've seen that's, like, emotionally devastating,
which is
I
probably
flip
that
over.
PD code story. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, that's the one you reserve for people who you're like, well, let's talk over a glass of wine or something.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But if I'm at a dinner party or whatever, I'm like, oh, let me tell you about the one time that this guy came in and he had an apple stuck up his butt. Because then people will be like, oh, okay, this is what I wanted. This is exactly what I anticipated.
You have to know your audience.
It's true. It's very true. So that is actually when I was first starting out as an ER nurse. We did get an ambulance call. It's also interesting in different ERs how they receive radio, dispatch, that sort of stuff from ambulances, because in this one ER we had like this big board, like a big whiteboard where you would write it in so that if anybody walked by they could see what's coming in. And some of the other ERs I work at, it's just like a red phone that you pick up and then like you just write it down and then you hope somebody like sees it. So that's more of the rural ones where you're just like, oh, there might be an ambulance coming in, we don't know. But in a higher acuity and a faster paced ER, more in those cities or in those somewhat just, you know, areas where you're the only ER, you see a lot of people. And so in this particular ER, there was on our board, like, a foreign object in body. Like, somebody wrote, like, a shorthand for that, but basically that's what they wrote on the board. Then they wrote the age of the person, the sex, and, like, how, you know, vital signs stable, and that they'd be there in 5 minutes. And it was just like, okay, like, you don't pay that any mind. You're just like, what room is it going to? Is it one of my rooms? Because I don't know what to do in terms of, well, because I was new, I was like, what do I do with this? Like, what do you mean? It didn't go to my room, but I was helping to get it settled. So I was like, okay, I'll stand by. And so this patient comes in, and he is in the prone position, which you always know that something good, for the most part, is about to happen when a patient comes in on a stretcher in the prone position.
Which is
because you're just
laying
like,
on their stomach.
Which is laying on their stomach. Because most people come in laying on their back. It's a supine position. That's what you normally associate most people coming in with. But when they're on their stomach, you're like, something is amiss.
Right.
Like, something
not good.
Yeah, like just to digress, a few of the people I've seen who come in prone have been, well, or on their side. Like, sometimes they're on their side because of pain, so you're like, well, maybe they're in pain, but this person wasn't necessarily in pain. Or pregnant. Or you could have the guy that was playing guitar on the stretcher, and he was playing Freebird on the way in, and we were like, is this guy drunk? Or is he just giving us a free show? I don't know. That was a whole different thing, but I mean, he was laying on his side too. So we're like, what is this guy here for? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think you could play the Freebird prone.
He was going for it. And he did have a guitar. It wasn't just like air guitaring. It was an actual guitar. Anyways, so this guy, though, this person that came in, they came in on their stomach. They came in the prone position. And, you know, I'm helping to get them settled. And EMS starts giving us report. And it's one of those things where you, like, are getting a report, but you're trying, like, to be professional during it.
Yes.
So they're like, this is a middle-aged male. You know, they gave the age, but we'll try and make sure it's the land of HIPAA. So they're like, this is a middle-aged male who was hanging out with his friends, and they were on the dunes, and they were hanging out. They were camping tonight, and they had been getting intoxicated, and, well, this gentleman ended up with an apple up his butt. And we were just like, okay. What are his vitals? Do you have a finger stick? What's his blood sugar? Like, you're just going through, like, everything, kind of, like, disregarding the whole actual reason why he's here. And they didn't say apple at the butt. They were like, he got an apple stuck up inside of him. And we were just like, okay. On purpose? Yep. Oh, okay. Okay. Just making sure that there's that part that was on purpose. So yeah, so this guy was hanging out with his buddy.
What kind of apple? Is this like a Granny Smith or like a Red Delicious or a Macintosh? Because there's different sizes.
Well, I wanted to do follow-up on that, but I never got it. But the thing was that I guess they had been playing like a game, like they had a contest. Is this what happens when men get together and they just like go out to the dunes? Did they have a contest called What Can You Shove Up Your Ass?
It's the old button apple game.
I guess, because they just were taking turns trying to shove things up there and then get them out, and then he couldn't get it out, and he was so drunk that he didn't really notice it for a while until, like, I guess he probably tried to actually get it out, and then he realized there was a pain problem. And it probably hooked around that second part, and then, it's no man's land. Once it clears that one sphincter in there, it's just like, I'm sorry, you need to go to the ER. That is a do not pass go situation. Like, you need some help.
Do not pass anything, yeah.
The guy ended up going to the OR. They tried to manually retrieve the object.
Yeah.
They did sedate him for that a little bit because he was intoxicated. So obviously you need to be careful with what you use and making sure that that person's not too compromised. But he did actually end up going to the OR, and they had to remove it in pieces. And I was like, did they give it back to the guy? Like, is that one of those situations where you're just like, here's what was in you. Do you want to take it home? Or do you just go, all right, we were successful in retrieving that object and we disposed of it accordingly? Like, do you put it in compost?
I feel like it should be composted in his yard and like grow a tree out of it or something.
He's like, this apple tree came from my butt. Well, let me tell you how. Like,
this one time.
This would be a great story for him at a dinner party. But yeah, so that was like my first, like there had been in this ER, because it was one of my first ER jobs, that there were some moments where I was like, oh my God, like I'm actually working in an ER where, you're like, it's high energy, there's this crazy code going on, or this person's losing a lot of blood. That was one of the funnier ones where I was just like, this actually happens? People actually do this? Like, they come in with stuff stuck up their butt, and 100% that was the beginning of what I would see later on down the line, because I would say to this day, like, I've seen the one apple from that person, and usually it's males, shockingly. I've seen 2 golf balls in different patients, so I've seen 2 patients who've had golf balls stuck in them. Of course, they slipped and fell, both of them, which is so crazy.
This is why you should never golf naked.
It's true. I'm blown away at what happens at 2 a.m. outside, where it becomes an issue of having a golf ball stuck up there. And then, there was one recently. Oh yeah, we did have somebody who got a sex toy stuck in them. So that was a 14-inch. Yeah, it was a 14-inch sex toy. It was a 14-inch dildo that was still vibrating.
Oh no.
That had to have the OR surgically remove that one. So that X-ray, that X-ray is great, but obviously, people were just like staring at it, going, "Huh, it's really up there, isn't it?" The patient was uncomfortable, but actually was not in a lot of pain. They just wanted it out. So that's why you use a flared base. You use a flared base.
Now, did they get that sex toy back?
I think they did. Like, I'm just like, don't you just like... Can somebody out there answer that question? What do you do with objects you remove out of people? Like, do you give them the option before they go into surgery? Like, would you like it back? Or would you like us to dispose it? Or do you give it to them after surgery?
Well, my dog got his puppy teeth removed when he was a puppy, and they gave them to me. It is not the same realm as an apple or a sex toy, but maybe? I guess it depends on the surgeon.
I'm like, I mean, it's your personal property, right? Because it's like inside you.
I think you've kind of claimed it as your own.
Do you get that Titleist back? And I'm just kind of like, I mean...
Again, what a terrible sponsorship for Titleist.
We're putting Titleist on blast tonight.
It's an embedded ad. Deeply embedded.
It's a hole-in-one situation.
When you're like, oh, people with stuff stuck in them, my stories are not as jovial. They are more impalements, which is...
Yes, I did get one impalement too.
One was a guy who was...
You see how I got excited for that? I don't know why I got excited.
Well, one actually I'm not going to share because I think it was a sexual assault.
Oh, that's always... That's...
Yeah, it was not good. So I'm not going to tell that story.
Damn. Ooh.
But the funny-ish impalement... I'm pausing because it's amusing, sort of, but terrible for this guy. This guy was so nice. And I'm trying to remember if I told this story before on my podcast. I don't think I did, because a lot of times I tell stories and I don't remember if I ever told them on the podcast, or I tell them and then I cut them out. And then
welcome to my world.
They don't get put in. And so I'm like, did I tell this? So this guy, this older gentleman, was doing something on his roof. And we get a call for a man that fell off a roof. Or a significant fall. The guy falls off like a 2 or 3 story roof. And when we get there, the fire department is already putting him on a backboard. And I was like, wow, they're working. Like, usually the fire department is not doing anything on a medical until you get there. And they had only been there, like, they knew we were right behind them. So we were really surprised. And we look at the fence, and the fence is bloody. And it's one of those, like, wrought iron, like, decorative fences with, like, the poles that stick up. The guy fell off the roof, straddled the fence through basically the perineum.
Ooh.
Like, right through his scrotum, and then fell off the fence and landed on the ground and hit his head.
No.
Yeah, and so...
That's a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, and he was a really nice guy. And so...
They always are.
Yeah, and so...
They always are when they have a ripped scrotum.
Yeah, and I went over and I talked to him as, like, we're boarding him, and the fire department goes, do you want to see his injury so you know what we're talking about? And they go, it's really bad. And of course, these are all men, and I'm the only female. And I was like, yeah, and they're all like, okay. And so, like, you expose the injury, which is what's left of his scrotum, and it was just this gaping hole, and I was like, okay, great. And so... So actually, like, his butt cheeks were actually...
face.
Well, his butt cheeks were actually holding pressure and tamponade,
really?
And, like, we just shoved a bunch of ABD, like, the trauma pads up there, and they were holding pressure, and they were kind of, like, controlling the bleeding really, really well. So it was fine, but a bunch of tissue would kind of come out with when I, like, exposed it just to take a look and make sure there was nothing else in there. And then we get him on the board, and I'm talking to him, and I was like, do you have any pain? He goes, no, I think my toe hurts, and... What's going on? Is my dog okay? And I was like, your dog's locked up, sir. And he's like, okay, is my dog okay? And I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus, for head injuries.
Like,
because
yay, perseveration.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want my dog to get out. Is my dog okay? And we're like, your dog is okay.
You're like,
he's
focus on that, though.
Yeah. I'm like, you're not in any pain. No. Is my dog okay, though? And I'm like, okay, great. Yay. And so then we got him to... the big hospital, and yeah, he was okay.
Yeah,
he was at the age where the scrotal tissue was not going to be utilized too much anymore, so you know, it was really... It
was like actually reconstructive.
Just some reconstruction, and I think we followed up later. It was one of the few cases, and I think he was, like, really missed all the major things, and he was totally fine.
Like,
but he was
still able to pee okay?
Yeah.
That's good.
I think he was all right, but I mean, yeah, he went into surgery right away, but yeah, it was just, he had, like, kind of a pretty big head injury. No bleed or anything. He just, had a nice
concussion, yeah.
Yeah, he just concussed himself in the right way. And it was like, okay, that time that someone got impaled on a fence through the scrotum, that's fun.
Well, see, I always feel so frustrated working emergency is that I don't get follow-up on people. And it's like, years later, I'll start, especially with this podcast and stuff, I'm thinking of topics and I go, gosh, I wonder what happened to that person. And you get no follow-up, which I feel like is it's a little bit frustrating because some of these cases you're just like, I wonder what happened. Like, I hope that was a good prognosis. And then in a way, it's kind of good you don't get follow-up because sometimes you just make up your own. So you're just like, I'm going to just choose to believe everything came out okay.
Right. and that you don't know the real family's history and you don't know the stories behind it, so you don't have as much of an emotional attachment to it. And literally, the episode that I did where I talked about getting carbon monoxide poisoning recently, I went back and looked at a really horrific case, and I was like, no, this was terrible. This is a terrible idea. I am not doing this again, because no, it was their names. It was all about the family. I don't want to know that shit. I can't. There's thousands and thousands of calls like that. I can't have all of those ghosts hanging around my mind. No, thank you.
Yeah, we're human at the end of the day. It's like, yeah, maybe for my shift, for what I have to do, I can be present, I can be professional, I can be 100% there. But my one friend, she calls it coming back to yourself. Like, the second you get into your car and you are leaving that parking lot and you have left the hospital, it's like you need to come back to yourself starting then. Like, you need to try as much as you can not to bring the things that you saw home with you. And sometimes you can't. And I mean, that's why you have your, whatever your coping mechanisms are, hopefully mostly healthy, in place, because it's like, you'll start thinking about what happened to those people, and that'll just lead you down that hole towards probably an unhappy resolution, really.
Yeah.
But actually, going back to impalement, and this one I do know the resolution to, there was a younger male that came into our ER that they had stabilized, but was not my patient. And I remember somebody had called on the call light, and I was in a good spot, so I was right there, and I answered it. And
what a nice nurse you are.
Sometimes I am. And it's all about throughput. You have to press the buttons. You can't pass any call lights. So I walk into the room, and here's the scene, is that this guy's on a call light, and he waves over at me in the bed, and I just notice, I don't know why it took me 2 seconds, but I noticed, he had a branch sticking out of his neck, just chilling there. And he was writing on a board whether or not, when he was going to surgery. So I go and find his nurse, and I'm like, number one, your patient wants to know when they're going to go to surgery. And number two, what the fuck happened to your patient? Why did they have a branch in their neck? And the nurse was like, oh, well, he was riding an ATV, and he took some sort of turn, and the traction gave, whatever. She was like, I don't know how it happened. All I know is that he was thrown off his ATV into this, big old thing of bushes, and his friends found him because he couldn't really move out of it. And so they came up, they found him, and they were like, dude, you got a branch sticking out of your neck. So this whole thing happened, it was one of those 1 in a million shots. And I guess when EMS came on scene, they cut down the branch enough so that it was still stable in his neck. But it was literally popping out of his neck. And I was just like, how did this kid not, well, he wasn't really a kid, but I was like, how did this guy not nick something? And the nurse was like, I don't know, but I swear to you, he's the nicest guy. I'm telling him not to talk. And
yeah.
And basically, he'll be in surgery probably in the next 30 minutes. I was like, cool, I'll go tell him. And part of the reason I was like, I'll go tell him is because I wanted to take a look at it again.
Right. Yeah. Suddenly I'm very helpful.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what do you need in that room? Oh yeah, I'll go and be your witness for a consent. So he still has a lot of his gear on because they were going to just take him into surgery as fast as they had a room ready. But I guess when they did their quick CT, they were like, yeah, he looks like he missed all the major vessels. I mean, his vitals were fine, so obviously there wasn't anything emergent, but they're like, no, we got to get that out because it's resting against a lot of major vessels. So that was one of those weird impalements that I was just, another one of those, it was early on in my nursing career where I was in the ER part, where I was just like, oh yeah, this is actually a thing that happens. And then this was before, I think, Grey's Anatomy, and I don't watch Grey's Anatomy, but I remember in nursing school, or no, so it wasn't before Grey's Anatomy, but maybe this episode wasn't, I don't know. But I just remember reading about one episode where somebody got impaled on some piece of metal or rebarb, and they had to decide which one was living and which one wasn't because of the way that it angled. It's dramatic. And I was like, that never happens. And then fast forward a few years later, and I was like, oh, people get impaled on stuff all the time. Never mind. I'm sure it doesn't happen to the point where you have to decide if somebody is living or dying if two people are impaled. But, I mean, that's actually kind of true that, if you put enough force behind a tree branch, it can get lodged in you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Which I was just like blown away by. But then I was like, well, it is what it is. But yeah, I was able to get follow-up from that nurse later on in the day, and she was like, yeah, he made it through just fine. He's resting and he's recovered. And then they were able to remove it with pretty much no incident. They had to clean it out really well, and obviously they had to watch for infection. But yeah, he had a good outcome as far as I know. Probably has like a really gnarly scar and a great story to tell. But
a fantastic story.
Yeah, he could be like, you want to know how I got this scar?
Buy me a drink first.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I got a branch through the neck. What?
Yeah.
But I mean, those are some of, I guess, those more like odd moments. And yeah, I don't think I've really shared any of those stories with anybody. So those are all yours.
Yay! Thank you.
You're welcome.
Before we go, do you want to plug your podcast? Where can we find you on social media?
Sure. Okay. So, if you haven't gotten sick of me at this point, I do have a podcast. It's People Are Wild. Basically, I keep it pretty short in terms of where you can find me. I have an email address, which is peoplearewildpod@gmail.com. And then on Twitter, it's @peoplearewild. I don't have a Facebook group. I don't have an Instagram. I don't even really know what a Snapchat is. I don't have any of that. It's pretty simple because I can only keep up with like one thing at a time.
But the Twitter is pretty amazing.
The Twitter is pretty lit, fam. I have a lot of fun on Twitter, but I also learn a lot from a lot of different people, and we got connected on Twitter, so I can sing the praises of Twitter. Plus, Twitter lets you use GIFs, so it's almost always there's a GIF for my emotions during any given shift. So, but yeah, Twitter is fun. I probably spend a little bit too much time on there, but it's basically where you can find me is on Twitter.
So speaking of Twitter, the Antidotes Twitter is Antidotes Pod, and I have all the social medias, which I never am very good about updating, but it's Antidotes Podcast on Instagram. The Facebook page and group are Antidote Stories in Medicine Podcast group or page, but the group is way better. And of course, you can always email me at antidotespodcast@gmail.com. I am always looking for more guests. If you are interested, please reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. Thank you again to Peter Hopkins for the custom intro music. And it is so good to be back. Please keep sharing the podcast, keep leaving reviews, keep interacting on social media. It is really wonderful to hear from everybody. Have a good week, and I will see you next time.